name is Lauren. I'm from Nebraska Wildlife Rehab. You may or may not have heard of us. I will talk about my organization a little bit today so you can get to know us. We are located in the Omaha community, but we do service the entire state of Nebraska. So we have lots of volunteers, lots of people who can get animals to us. We do education all over the place. And today I'm going to talk about our high school science academy. And this program is one of my favorites that I get to do. And it's totally based on career literacy, getting students to understand what career options there are for them in wildlife and supporting animals. And then also it's really centered on equity, right? So it's a really affordable, great option for students who might not have a lot of resources, or they can't go to like traditional science camps because of fees or costs. And so I will talk a lot about that, but I love this program. It's super fun, and I'm glad you're all here, even though I had a super not sparkly name for this presentation. I will work on that. So first of all, what is Nebraska Wildlife Rehab? We are a rehabilitation facility, so we give medical care to native wild Nebraska animals. And we just opened our brand new animal hospital, which is really exciting. So we finally have a place where the public can go and bring animals. In the past, we work with the Humane Society and lots of other peoples to get our patients. But we finally, 10 years in the making, 10 years of planning, we got our 15,000 square foot building with species-specific nurseries. It has a fully outfitted veterinary hospital, including an in-house laboratory. We have cold laser therapy, 3D MRI capabilities, dental and regular radiographs, and a surgery suite, which is great. We are employing veterinarians and some vet techs coming up soon. And what's also exciting at this building, we have education and training rooms so that we can do some sorts of programming on site. We did just open up our volunteer applications again. So if you're interested in working and helping us do rehab work or help us keep the building going, you can go to our website, which I'll put in the chat, and check out our options for volunteering. We're on 96th and M Street. And then also we're going to have a really great outdoor pollinator habitat set up so we can take people outside and talk about living with animals in an urban setting. So that kind of brings me to why do we exist, right? Because the old train of thought used to be, why don't we just let nature take its course, right? They're wild animals. There's these risks associated with them that they're trained to deal with. But unfortunately, what we find is we did a study a couple of years ago, and over 95% of our patients came to us because of negative influences or being injured from humans. Mostly these are in urban settings, and it's things we don't think about or things we don't go out trying to negatively affect animals, right? Car collisions, incidences with litter, all that kind of stuff. So we decided that the best preventative measure to getting more animals coming into our hospital lies in education and also in fostering empathy for non-human animals that we live so closely with in places like Omaha and Lincoln, and where animals have become adapted to live closer to us. So we give medical care to animals, and then a kind of the other big part of our organization is that education component, and talking to our community and helping them understand and have empathy for our wild animals. So that kind of gets into then our vision. We really want to make sure that our community understands the importance of natural habitats and that they're educated and inspired to become leaders in environmental conservation and sciences. A lot of kids that we get, a lot of students, they think that the only wildlife care option is to become a veterinarian or to work at the zoo, but there's so many possibilities and there's so many jobs out there that we need educated people in. And so we like to really talk about those at our education programs. So our values obviously is that education is the key to preservation of our native wildlife. Animals should be treated with dignity and respect. They deserve the opportunity to live in natural habitats, and that youth and adults that engaged in volunteer service learning will grow that respect and that empathy for animals in our environment. So kind of based out of these main tenements of our organization, we started what we call the High School Science Academy. So this was started in 2015, and it is completely grant funded and at no cost to the students. So the way we kind of set it up is it's one lecture and one lab per month. It is the same speaker talking on the same topic. And this gives kids kind of a chance to sit down, listen to a lecture, be introduced to a topic, but then that following Saturday, we'll go out in the field or go into the laboratory and we'll get some kind of hands-on experience. We also have some optional overnight opportunities, which I'll get into in a little bit. But the main part is that High School Science Academy is there to provide these unique STEM opportunities to underprivileged and potentially economically needy communities. We have a lot of kids a lot of students in the Omaha area who are dependent on school for food security and for continuing their education. And we want to make sure that we're offering another opportunity for them that is at no cost to them and is equitable and accessible. Going kind of into more academy specifics, we generally accept as many students as we can fit on a bus. Generally, that's about 42 students. And it is available to all high schools in the metro area. We've had some exceptions. We've had some kids who are really excited from like North Platte or Lincoln join in. And then we also extend this offer to homeschool communities and homeschool students as well. So this is kind of a quick overview of all the schools in the past that we have had students from. Another cool aspect is to get these kids to all know each other and learn and meet people from different schools who are like-minded with them. And it's pretty exciting. It's a pretty good time. We really like it. We've had really great kids and really great topics. And that gets me into what do we do at High School Science Academy? So I'm going to talk a little bit about the curriculum and how we run things. So first of all, there's a couple main pillars that we focus on, and one is stewardship and career literacy. As I said, there's a lot of students out there who say, they want to help animals and they don't know how to do it. They think that they have, only a couple of options. Well, we really want to broaden their horizons on different jobs in academia or different jobs in conservation, where they can utilize even other strengths that they might have to be able to support wildlife in ways that they never thought of. Looking at high school students in their stages of development, this is kind of when they're starting to plan for the future. And we've kind of started to introduce some complex issues in the world, such as climate change, living, like urban sprawl, living with animals. And they've kind of started to think about how do they work in that role? How do they impact that? How do they work with that? And so we want to introduce a lot of these topics and then talk about what people are doing to support wildlife and to help them going forward. So next, this is some of our examples of programming. So we've done lots of different things, such as forensic entomology is always a favorite. People are interested in working with bugs and what insects can communicate to us in different ways, such as with, decomposing bodies, or maybe it's other decomposing materials and how those insects work together. We've also done like mist netting bats and trapping small animals. Robot cockroaches is always a fun one. We get into the lab and we put little transmitters on cockroaches, and the students can use their cell phones to control the behavior and movement of cockroaches. And then zombie crickets, as we get to explore some interesting pests and things, parasites that live inside cockroaches, which is pretty fun. And then there's also things like geology, climate change, freshwater ecology, right, and stuff that's kind of more wildlife adjacent. Anything to kind of get into those STEM topics where we're thinking about helping our planet and learning more about it. So another big thing we're constantly thinking about is unlearning anthropocentrism, which is basically thinking that humans and man are dominant or more superior than other animals, than other non-human animals. And so we've done this in a lot of different ways. We've looked at the use of animals in laboratories. We've looked at the use of animals in academia and in college classrooms. Recently, we started a new topic based on ranching and farming, which is great. And the students were really encouraged to talk about some issues, talk about things that they had questions on, and engage with current wildlife management practices and issues in wildlife that we have in Nebraska. That's kind of another big pillar that we really try to focus on is our local community in our state. So we discuss and rationalize arguments based on scientific fact that negates common cognitive bias that is very often there. An example of this is we usually have some in-depth conversations on prairie dogs, how they're treated in our state, what we are doing for them now, what we could be doing for them. Like I said, ranching, and then also human-animal interaction, kind of negating those negative animal stereotypes, getting them to understand that things like snakes or possums or bats that they might be scared of are still very important to our ecosystem. Okay. So critically thinking about animals, constantly kind of rearranging their thoughts about it. And that's kind of what our curriculum is based off of. So now I want to talk about why I think it's very successful. And there's a couple of things that we do and a couple of interesting pedagogies that we utilize that kids are engaged and it's really making an impact on them. One of these factors is that it's really set and understands place-based education. So students are going to be learning in new and really stimulating environments that could include natural habitats or local college campuses. And this immersive learning situation emphasizes local landscapes, natural history, heritage, culture, and gets them to really understand our local ecosystem. It sounds kind of silly, but even taking them onto places like Creighton and going in those buildings and having them navigate parking and getting into different rooms can kind of be exciting for them to go to a college campus, check it out, get kind of familiar with that setting. And then we also do 2 overnight trips. We do one to the Platte River to see the crane migration every year. We also go to Cedar Point Biological Station, which is kind of out by Lake McConaughey out in West Nebraska. And we also visit the Niobrara River Valley, and that's where we kind of concentrate on ranching and agriculture in Nebraska. So being in these cool environments, these cool situations kind of opens their minds and really gets them engaged in what we're doing. We also really focus on interdisciplinary approaches to science. There's a lot of times where we sit and we'll have some guided curricula based on like creative writing. We'll do some kind of arguments and talking about social situations. We'll do lots of journaling. We do a lot with technology and multimedia. And we're currently working on a situation where we can get some cameras, some like big, nice DSLR cameras for our students to borrow during High School Science Academy. They've been back order because of the pandemic forever. But then we're going to open up a lot of wildlife and ethics in photography and print and digital media with wildlife, because getting people interested in understanding of animals, having that media is really important. So those people that do those kinds of things are just as important as scientists and veterinarians getting animals out there. So we're going to be working with some new wildlife photography things that we can get into. We have an in-house media specialist here at Nebraska Wildlife Rehab who will be working with that, who's great. He's done lots of different film and photography festivals and stuff, and he's worked with PBS and NET and National Geographic. So it'll be really great for the kids to kind of get into that too. So we've kind of started to feel out the waters with that, but once we get our cameras, that'll be another really cool aspect of High School Science Academy. So another reason not to be overlooked why this is definitely beneficial, and why our kids love it is because we're getting them into social emotional learning, getting them with new peers, working on their social skills. And we do a lot with kind of recreation and like playing with the risk a little bit, getting them outside their comfort zone and trying new things. So in the past, we have done lots of things such as sit around the fire and play instruments and think of songs about our wildlife that we can sing to people. And we've made like TikToks and stuff like that with educational media. We've taken them canoeing, we go hiking, we've done orienteering with GPSs and compasses. We recently, this last year, did a high and low ropes course at Fontenelle Forest, which was great. And we go swimming and do all kinds of fun things. And that kind of helps emphasize, like I said, talking to their peers, gaining these relationships with other like-minded individuals of their age that hopefully they'll hold on to some of those relationships for a long time. Okay, and then the last and most important thing, and why we created High School Science Academy in the first place, is we're focusing on making science accessible and equitable. It is completely free to students. They pay for absolutely nothing. When they apply, they do need to write a short application process, why they are interested, what if they have any plans for the future, what they're interested in. And then we do have them have a recommendation written by either a science teacher or guidance counselor, kind of recommending them into the program. So once we identify good individuals and students for our program, we want to make sure that there are very, very limited barriers for them to complete every single event and program and get through the entire course. A lot of science programs will have extra costs associated with supplies or PPE, and we make sure that we are supplying all of that at no cost to them. We also are committed to food security and making sure that when the students are with us, they are getting healthy, balanced meals, mostly healthy. Sometimes there's some pizza dinners, but all of our evening lectures are served with a dinner, and then the weekend lab, we have breakfast right off the bat all together, and then after our in-program, after our programming, we have lunch together before they go out. Additionally, all of our overnight trips, so for example, Cedar Point Biological Station, and when we go to the Niobrara River Valley, it's like a 5-day trip. We make sure that we are covering all of their food. We have plenty of snacks for them. We always bring extra essentials such as toiletries or blankets to distribute to the students if they don't have them. And we offer transportation as well to all of those in need for the events. Overnight trips, we do take buses and vans and whatnot to the places that are a little bit farther away, so that it's easier for them to all participate. So this is a quote from one of our students from this last year. I just kind of put it in as kind of a testimonial to our program. So she said, this was talking about our Cedar Point Biological Station visit. This last week has been one of the most positive experiences of my life. It can be really discouraging when you're surrounded by people that don't feel the same way you do about the planet and nature. Being able to spend time with like-minded individuals really emphasized how important this work is to me and also to the world as a whole. So this is great. We're making them think about how can they impact the planet, how can they support wildlife, and what their future is going to hold. And then this is a picture of our students overlooking the lake at Cedar Point Biological Station as the sun was going down. It's a nice little moment. So that is it for my presentation. I did put in our website. So /education is where you can learn more about our education initiatives. We also you can go then to the volunteer tab if you're interested in volunteering. And there is my email there as well. So if you have any other questions after today that you're thinking about, or you would like to partner for some sort of event or program, definitely reach out to me. Like I said, with our new building, we have a lot more resources at our disposal to spread education across the whole state. And we're really working on the scope and trying to work statewide instead of just with our local Omaha community. So at this point, I'm done a little early. I will take any questions that you guys have.
Well, I had a question about funding. So it's all free to all your students. How do you go about making sure you're able to provide everything that your students need?
Yeah, exactly. So we have, when we first started this this program, we wrote a grant with a foundation that works with education in Omaha. And then ever since that year, we have had that grant renewed. So we're thankful to the foundation that we work with in making sure that they understand how great this program is. And then they just keep funding us year after year, as long as we can find the students and, continue to commit to the tenements and the main central pillars of our educational program.
Very cool. What other questions? Okay, so do you follow up with your students like after they come to your science academy? Do you know, like, have any of them chosen like a career? Have you redirected their career path? That's what we've got a question pretty much in the chat wanting to know if you follow up with some of your attendees.
Yeah, I would love to do that a little bit more often. This is only, well, it's my second year in the position, but it's my first year not being in a pandemic. And I think that would be something that would be really interesting to track. In the past, we have had students come back and start volunteering with us and then go through our intern program. So we have a fairly rigorous college intern program that really sets them up that's more wildlife rehab specific. And then we have had some that have gone on to do more just like kind of basic biology degrees and then get into education in that way, generally like more of a traditional classroom. But I would definitely like to follow up with some of our students in the future and kind of see where they go, because we've just had such great students. Even at the high school level, they are so passionate, and to see some of their thoughts and dreams for the future and things that they want to implement is so inspiring. And so I really would like to set up a little bit more formal way to kind of check in with them and make sure that they know we're still here if they need help with their career or in college and whatnot with that as well.
So we had another question in the chat. What have you learned along the way working with high school students? Is there anything that's like really stuck out to you while working with that age group?
Yeah, so there is definitely a need to kind of focus on the individual and getting to know them. And that's kind of hard with 42 students. But there's definitely at that point in time, they're somewhat set in their learning process. And there's going to be some that are great in bigger groups and they're great bouncing ideas off each other. And then it's good to kind of understand the ones that work better as an individual and maybe they need a little bit more space. And this is then especially important at the end of the year when we start taking overnight trips together, just kind of checking in with them, because honestly, even at this age, there's a lot of them that have not been to an overnight camp or some sort of overnight programming. And that can be a really new experience for them when we load them on a bus with 40 other students. And then sometimes they have to sleep like they're not outside, but they're in cabins that are unair conditioned. And so that can be kind of a new experience for them. Communication additionally is very key in that situation. A lot of times you can kind of soothe any anxiety or nerves the students have for the program just by making sure they have all the information about the itinerary, what we're doing and when, what is available to them, what is their sleeping situation going to be like, what are we going to have for meals, because kind of getting rid of that unknown really helps kind of settle some of those students who especially need a little bit more structure. And it's interesting because I thought working with high school students, we would have some interpersonal kind of issues and maybe there would be some cliques or something that would form. And what's really great is the students that we've gotten have worked very well as a group together, and they make sure that they include each other. I know a good portion of them even communicate outside our program and have kind of formed relationships and friendships past high school science academy. And yeah, making sure that when they're in high school, this is a great time to start asking hard-hitting questions as well. So think about getting them thinking critically about animals and about wildlife and what we do with them. So in a lot of situations, we'll say, you know, okay, we saw this today. What are your thoughts on that? You know, is this, and we don't want to ever categorize something as bad or good, but does this need a little tweaking? Is there anything in the future we could do to make this process a little more supportive of our wildlife, and things like that, kind of keeping their brains going, because they are so smart, all the students we've worked with, and they have so much going on in their heads that some of the things they say we haven't even thought of. And then it's kind of interesting following up with them about their thoughts as they kind of develop some more ideas for the future and how they would like to see things go.
A couple more questions. So a person was curious about the position on farming and ranching. Sometimes it's in the negative space, and I just want to know what the students are thinking about the farming and ranching perspective. Is it positive? Is it negative? What does that look like?
Yeah. And so that's what's really great is we really try to take just a neutral side and show them a couple different ways of farming and ranching, and kind of let the local ranchers or farmers outline why they think the way that they do things is positive, right? So we, some of the things we did is we visited a farm that was completely dedicated to permaculture. And then we just visited a ranch that was doing a lot of state work to get in native grasses for their grazing cattle. And so then we kind of sit the kids down and talk about, like, is this good? Like, what are the positives of this? Okay, it supports pollinators, but maybe they need a little bit more of this in their diet, or for permaculture, like, is it, you know, what are your, breaking that kind of down. It's even kind of like a rustic development, like one of the farms we went to, you know, he grows everything he eats, and pretty much everything he needs in his house he makes, like, in his house, and it's very sustainable, and kind of opening them their minds to other ways that we can work with the environment in ways like that. And then we kind of talked about wildlife, specifically like coyotes or prairie dogs. You know, in Nebraska, we have issues with these animals. You know, this is kind of how people handle it now. What are your thoughts on that? How could we change that? So it's definitely not a negative outcome. You know, we want the students to understand, you know, we have a lot of people and they need to eat. And we want them to see some of the positive ways that ranchers are working with our environment to try to mitigate erosion and other habitat losses, such as when you plant large amounts of corn or whatnot. You know, we want them to see that there are ranches and there are farms that are doing this in a way that is sustainable and it's supportive to other wildlife that is in the area. Because and that trip is always one of the most interesting, because a lot of these city kids have never even been on a farm before. And a thought comes to mind of, like, one of the students saw like a round hay bale for the first time in his life, and he got so excited because he's like, I've never seen these in real life, and he's like climbing on top of them. And so it's just kind of an interesting trip to get the kids out of the city, see that, you know, also farmers, they're not just like going out there and planting things with little education. Like, a lot of them have science-based degrees. You know, they've studied seed ecology, they've studied the habitat and soil ecology. And so there's a lot of science behind farming and ranching. And so a lot of kids don't understand that as well. And so we kind of want to introduce them to the fact that a lot of ranches and farmers are working with really great science principles to make sure that they're responsibly and sustainably creating food for other humans.
Very cool. I was also wanting to know what your student to staff ratio looks like. You said you have about 42 kids that fit in a bus. You know, what does that look like when it comes to folks helping to present these topics?
Yeah, so we generally have 3 staff, and we make sure that we have both genders represented in our staff as well for the overnight trips, especially. And it's generally myself and then our executive director and then another educator who go and help facilitate these programs.
Very cool. I wanted to know, do you ever have like that romantic drama that goes on? Because I've worked with middle schoolers and that happens a lot. So I wanted to know, does that happen with the high schoolers as well?
You know, it's funny. We haven't had any issues with that yet. I definitely understand. I also work in a lot of middle schools and it can definitely be drama. Thankfully at the high school level, and we generally work with older kids too, we generally accept a couple sophomores, but otherwise it's mainly juniors and seniors. Thankfully they don't have too many issues with that. We've seen a couple like innocent romance blooming, which is always kind of fun. But for the most part, we don't have any issues like arguments or negative interactions in that respect.
Good. That's great.
Yeah.
Okay. What other questions do people have for Lauren? I feel like we've talked a lot about like, man, you just cover so many topics. Is there a topic that is your favorite to teach the kids?
So one of my favorite things is when we go to Cedar Point, because we hit a lot of just like those main kind of ecology topics. So we do a day on ornithology and we misnet birds and we talk to a professor who does ornithology for UNL. And then the next day we'll do herpetology and we focus on snakes and turtles and we go out in the field and then do some lectures. And then the next day we'll do geology. And it's kind of like almost a boot camp, which is kind of fun. And it really gets them out in the field and seeing, you know, there's kind of two perspectives. Like I could be a scientist where I'm outdoors a lot and I'm working in these conditions and I'm working directly with wildlife. But then there's also a lot of ways that you can be a scientist. And if that's not your thing, you know, you can be indoors, you can be in a lab and you can be doing research in that kind of way. The forensic entomology one is always kind of a favorite too. We get some pigs from their entomology department, and then as the carcasses start to decompose, our students are able to kind of get in there and play with maggots, as gross as that sounds, and kind of make observations about how animals decompose and how insects work with that, what kind of insects you can find at those sites. And then we talk a lot about carrion beetles and whatnot too, which is always a fun topic. But yeah, other than that, it's interesting because we kind of pick a lot of like small little niches of things that they maybe didn't think about. Like maybe they like birds, but then we do in-depth bird behavior, you know, and things that like if you're interested in geology, we're going to focus on this one geological component and kind of narrow in on some of those more smaller topics.
I wouldn't have thought playing with maggots and dead pig carcasses is like a great education, but that sounds like fun. I'm glad that students are learning.
There's definitely the ones who are kind of queasy, you know.
Right.
But it's fun. We'll take samples of them, you know, and then take them back and look at them under a microscope. And generally, by the end, they're a little bit more familiar and they're okay with the topic, which is always fun.
So we had a question about navigating the program, coming back from COVID and all that fun protocol that has been going on. Do you have any advice for others designing student trips during COVID challenges? Yeah,
so definitely, this goes without saying, but be flexible. You know, I can't tell you how many times we're the week before a program or an overnight trip, and then an organization reaches out and is like, oh, the place where you're having the kids sleep, we can't do that anymore. So have some backup plans. Make sure the kids know kind of off the bat that a lot of things might change due to COVID. And one thing we've really done, and we really haven't had a lot of lashback on, which I'm happy with, is on these overnight trips where kids are going to be sleeping somewhat close, potentially without masks, we have had them required to have their COVID vaccination card on file with us to prove that they're vaccinated. And honestly, a lot of parents are really, that makes them feel a lot safer too. And they've thanked us, frankly, for making sure that we're requiring that, because then they know that their students are safe. Also, even if regardless of vaccination requirements, we've had the students make sure that they're wearing masks when we're indoors or outside if we're not socially distanced. And we just put all of that up front. If that's not something they're comfortable with or not something they want to do, unfortunately, they won't be able to do our program because student safety is just going to be one of our main priorities. And those are the stipulations we've put in place to make sure that we're trying to make sure it's as safe an environment as possible.